If you're living with rheumatoid arthritis or any inflammatory arthritis, you know the struggle of living with joint pain, stiffness in your joints, or even the fatigue that comes along with it. And you see your rheumatologist and you talk about the medications and what's making you feel better and worse. But one thing you hardly ever talk about is food or diet. And some foods can fuel inflammation. Other foods can trigger flares. Today, we're going to talk about 5 foods that could be making your rheumatoid arthritis worse and different swaps that you can use to make yourself feel your best. I know that number 3 is a little bit surprising, but I've seen a lot of people have flares when they try it. I definitely think it's worth talking about. I'm Dr. B with Plant Forward MD. Join me as we dive right into these foods. So our first category is going to be sugary foods, but I'm talking sneaky inflammation. We know the obvious ones, candy, pastries, and sugary cereals for sure. People have heard about this. But what about all those sneaky ones, like the healthy granola bars, the protein shakes, smoothies, even flavored yogurts? It's always going to be better. Get your own yogurt and put your own berries on it and sprinkle a little bit of sugar or honey if that's what you prefer, rather than getting it from the store, because those tend to have a lot of sugar in them. Also condiments, barbecue sauce, ketchup, all of those things also can have a lot of sugar. Check out your soy sauce bottle next time, because with the high fructose corn syrup, even that's not as innocent as we'd like it to be. So why are these sugary items so bad for you? Well, they're pro-inflammatory in general. Sugar can trigger the release of cytokines and increase your levels of IL-6 and TNF-alpha, which drive inflammation. Also, excess sugar feeds the gut bacteria, the bad ones though. So we don't want excess amount of bad gut bacteria. This will disrupt the balance of our gut microbiome, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. There was a study on sugary soda drinks. Women who were drinking these every day had a higher risk of developing rheumatoid arthritis with these sugary sodas. Okay, so what can you do as an alternative? Well, replacing the soda with water, of course. But a lot of people don't like drinking water. So you could do sparkling water and add some lemon or mint or a little bit of other flavor in them too. Sometimes I like to ground up some pineapple, especially if we haven't finished it and it's kind of heading towards those last few days. I'll grind it up and put it in with some sparkling water, and it's actually pretty tasty if you mix it up. For dessert, you could do baked cinnamon apple slices. You could dehydrate them a little bit or just bake them and sprinkle some sugar and cinnamon. See, now you're controlling that sugar. Even if you're adding it, you're probably not adding as much as you would get from somewhere if you bought it. Your action item for this week is to swap out that sugary item that you're having every day for a healthier alternative. Just for the next 7 days. Try it out and see if you feel any better. Just that one snack. That's your action item. Our next category is refined carbohydrates. Let's define what this means, because a lot of people get confused. It's like white rice, white pasta, white bread, pastries, other processed foods. These are called refined carbohydrates, and it can make your blood sugar kind of go crazy. Refined carbs are kind of stripped of those nutrients, right? So it's not the carbs that are bad, but these specific ones, they don't have those nutrients that we really want them to have. And this can cause rapid blood sugar spikes. High blood sugar causes inflammation. Now, if you have diabetes as well, I would say a lot of people don't know there's a different type of arthritis that you can get with diabetes. And it's called diabetic cheiroarthropathy. One of the ways that we check for them is kind of like to do this. And a lot of people can't even put their hands together because it's like this, because they have so much inflammation. The blood sugar has been going all over the place. The diabetes is uncontrolled. And it's almost like a separate arthritis that you get because of this blood sugar. So we know that increased amounts of sugar is contributing towards inflammation. These high blood sugar levels cause AGEs, advanced glycation end products, to increase, which can damage tissues. Studies have shown that diets that are high in refined carbs have raised CRP levels, C-reactive protein, which is a marker of inflammation. So, action item for this week. When you're eating pasta, switch it or swap it out for chickpea pasta. And if you don't like that, then consider some of the different types of lentil pastas that are out there, or even whole grain pasta if you really can't tolerate those. You can start at the beginning of the week and maybe make some quinoa or farro as a different grain. And if you cannot eat just that with your food, then try mixing it in with rice so that you're reducing your amount of white rice. And this is how you start slow. Just add a little bit of that other grain into it. Mix it up. I have seen these sold kind of as instant brands in the big box stores, but I will say that they have such little amounts of the other grain. It's mostly white rice still, so it's better to kind of make your own because you can control the ratios. I often like to make my own bread. It has a lot of different components to it. It's kind of a little bit complex sometimes, but my kids love it. So I do use different grains. I use whole grain, I use oatmeal flour, quinoa flour. A common misconception misconception is that bread is bad. It's not that bread is bad, it's the refined carbohydrates, right? So if you change your ratios a little bit, it's still something that could be giving you a lot of nutrition. Your action item for this week is, at least at one meal, try replacing your white rice with another alternative, like a different whole grain, quinoa, farro, barley, any of those, or at least if you can, reduce the consumption of white rice or white pasta. Okay, the next category is fermented foods. And I know this is a little bit surprising because I'm in favor of fermented foods in general. If you've seen any of my other videos or if you've seen any of my cooking videos, you can see I use a lot of fermented foods and I'm a big fan. But why the caution with rheumatoid arthritis? Fermented foods are rich in beneficial bacteria, right? So the good bacteria, we want to use them, and we want them specifically to improve our gut health. Because we're seeing in research studies that when people have less diversity in their gut, like in their gut microbiome, that their RA might be more severe. You could have more inflammation because of it. So absolutely, we want to have more diversity in the gut microbiome. We want the good bacteria from the fermented foods, like from kimchi and sauerkraut and miso, yogurt, kefir. These are great fermented foods. I have here a new bottle of kimchi that we're going to use soon, but there are issues with these foods as well, especially if you have rheumatoid arthritis. And one of the main problems could be histamine intolerance, because fermented foods, they release a substance called histamine, and not everybody can tolerate that. It can increase the rate of headaches, fatigue, even joint pain, which you definitely don't want more of if you have rheumatoid arthritis. So a lot of people can't tolerate because of the histamine release. Then the other issue is the fact that these are high salt foods, a lot of them. For example, this is my miso, and I like to keep it in my freezer and use it in different recipes, take it out when I need to. Now, remember, you have to use just a little bit of it, because if you use more, about 0.6 ounces of this is 37% of your daily value of sodium. This is a high salt food, so you're not gonna use a ton of it. You're gonna use just a very little bit of it. Same with kimchi, it can be very high salt, even sauerkraut. So you have to look for low salt versions of that. But if you cannot tolerate it, there's also great prebiotic foods that you can have. For example, garlic, onions, asparagus, bananas. They're not going to release histamine. They're not going to have high salt, so those might be great for you. But overall, fermented foods are good. So for rheumatoid arthritis or any inflammatory arthritis, the best time to use them is when your inflammation is reduced. So if you're in a high active flare of RA, this is not the time to start introducing these new fermented foods, at least not a lot of them. You could start small and then kind of see how you tolerate and go forward. So what I would say is reduce the inflammation, maybe talk to your practitioner and say, I need to get my RA under control. Once it's getting under control, then start introducing foods, fermented foods specifically, one by one, and kind of watching how you do so that you don't get any of these other symptoms that you certainly don't want. And then even with the high salt. So high salt, I know we don't talk about it as much, but certainly high salt diets have been associated with more inflammation, more active inflammatory arthritis. We've seen this in the literature. So you want to really pay attention to that, because fermented foods can have high salt. So action item for you is, if you're eating fermented foods this week, try just having a tablespoon, see how you do, and then seeing how you do with prebiotic foods as well. Watch how your body responds. For people who love popcorn, when you go to the movies, the popcorn smells amazing and you really want to have it. If you can avoid it, that would be better, or if you can eat it just small quantities is also better. But if you make popcorn at home, you can actually buy these great cheap silicone alternatives that you can pop your own kernels in, and it actually comes out pretty soft, because I know that sometimes when you make it on the stovetop, it's too hard. You don't want to break your teeth on this, but actually some of the silicone ones that you can get online really do make it softer, and a better version than getting all of the popcorn outside when you don't know what oil they're using. Our last category is processed meats. So I'm not saying all meats, I'm saying here specifically processed meats like salami, sausages, hot dogs. I know people love these, bacon, deli meats. So specifically, it's the way that they are processed. They have something called AGEs, advanced glycation end products. And this is what comes out and increases the inflammation. So it's the processing of how they're done. They have high amounts of saturated fat usually, and also that can increase inflammation. There was a 2017 study that did have that association with highly processed meats causing increased in rheumatoid arthritis symptoms. So what can you do as an alternative? An alternative for your sandwich is, instead of putting in that processed deli meat or any processed meat, try adding grilled or marinated tofu. And for breakfast, replace the bacon. I know it's tough, but replace that bacon with avocados or roasted sweet potatoes. When you roast them, they actually taste pretty good. And for snack time, try homemade hummus or fruit, or my favorite, which is roasted chickpeas. I've even put them on pizza before. I have a recipe in one of my other videos. Your action item this week is to replace just one of your meals that is meat-based with a whole food protein like lentils, beans, or tofu. If you found this information helpful, consider adding some of these foods to your daily life and seeing if it helps your arthritis symptoms. Small changes can make big improvements over time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Dr. Banasali with Plant Forward MD, here for tips and tricks to help improve your health.